There will be a briefing in this room by Annalena Baerbock, who, as you know, is the president of the General Assembly. She'll brief you on issues including the Global Plan of Action to Combat Trafficking in Persons and the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And on this day, we have a message on behalf of the Secretary General, says that in which the Secretary General clearly views violence against women and girls as a global scourge, intensified by digital technology. In a video message for the commemoration of the day, the Secretary General says it is ending this scourge requires collective action, with governments criminalizing online abuse, tech companies ensuring safe platforms, and communities rejecting online hate. On the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration, the Secretary General urges the world to unite to end violence now and everywhere. And in a short while, I will be joined by our guests from UN Women and the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, who will brief you on this year's International Day on the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Earlier this morning, on behalf of the Secretary General, Courtney Rattray, the chef de cabinet, delivered remarks to the special meeting of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. The Secretary General, in the remarks, reaffirmed the fundamental truth: the Palestinian people have a right to dignity, a right to justice, and a right to self-determination. He welcomed the recent ceasefire and the Security Council resolution on Gaza, urging all parties to fully implement these measures and to move towards the next phase. He called for unhindered humanitarian access and reminded Israel of its obligations under international law. He also appealed to member states to meet the $4 billion flash appeal target for this humanitarian crisis. Mr. Guterres also reiterated his call for an end to the unlawful occupation and for the irreversible progress towards a two-state solution based on pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states. He concluded with a message of hope that children in Palestine and Israel will one day wake to a world without fear, hope that families across the Middle East will live in dignity and not in despair, and hope that two peoples bound by history, by geography, and humanity will live side by side in peace. Turning to the situation on the ground in the Palestinian territories, I can tell you that we continue to be concerned by the impact of today's heavy rain on people across the Gaza Strip. This comes after other days of rain. Once again, tents and entire areas where displaced people are sheltering have been flooded. Many families in Gaza are living in poorly equipped shelters prone to flooding. This inevitably leaves people highly vulnerable to inclement weather. We and our partners are doing everything possible to mitigate the issue, including the repurposing of empty sacks of flour and food to contain the flooding in displacement sites. But our humanitarian colleagues stress that much more is required. As you well know, the needs are immense, and the humanitarians working to further scale up the response still face impediments. Part of these hurdles are the systematic denial of the systematic denial of critical items, as well as the ban on the operations of key aid groups, including some of our partner NGOs. We continue to work to see that these restrictions are lifted. Today's rain comes as our partners continue to address the damage caused by the last round of heavy rains on November 14th. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that 3 child-friendly spaces in Khan Yunis had suspended operations due to the damage from the storm have resumed their activities, restoring children's access to essential protection and support services. As we mark the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women, I just want to flag that according to our colleagues at the UN Population Fund, most women in Gaza have been displaced at least 4 times to live in overcrowded shelters, lacking privacy and protection. The agency warns that girls in Gaza are at risk of early marriage and that gender-based violence is on the rise, as are the cases of suicide or attempted suicide among survivors. UNFPA's teams are providing psychosocial care on the ground, reopening safe spaces for women and girls, and providing support to tens of thousands of people. OCHA also reports that humanitarian partners have recently established a new safe space for women and girls at Al-Katiba area of Gaza City. The site will provide psychosocial support and other relevant services to survivors and those at risk of gender-based violence. Turning north to southern Lebanon, our colleagues at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights warned today that almost a year since the cessation of hostilities between Lebanon and Israel, attacks by the IDF continue on Lebanon, causing civilian deaths and destructions, alongside worrying threats of wider violence. Meanwhile, our peacekeeping colleagues tell us it's recorded 106 Israeli airstrikes since the cessation of hostilities was announced on November 27th of last year. Just this last Saturday, UNIFIL peacekeepers observed 4 Israeli airstrikes in 3 locations in the mission's area of operations in South Lebanon. All were in Sector East. Such strikes are in violation not only of Lebanese territorial sovereignty, but of Security Council Resolution 1701 as well. Peacekeepers also discovered multiple unexploded ordnance, including mortar and artillery shells and a rocket in Sector West and in Sector East. These were all referred to the Lebanese army for disposal. UNIFIL peacekeepers have discovered more than 300 unexploded ordnances over the last year. We continue to call on parties to uphold their ceasefire obligations in good faith. Meanwhile, UNIFIL peacekeepers are also continuing to train the Lebanese armed forces on sea and on land. Turning to Sudan and the continuing devastating humanitarian situation in North Darfur State, our partners are providing urgent services to people who escaped El Fasher, but needs far exceed resources. The International Organization for Migration tells us as of yesterday, more than 106,000 people have been displaced from El Fasher and surrounding villages since the city was taken over by the Rapid Support Forces a month ago. Our Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, who, as you know, recently visited Tawila, stressed the need for unhindered access to civilians wherever they are. Tawila is, as you know, in the town where many of those displaced are arriving, facing acute malnutrition and life-threatening illnesses. Our humanitarian partners in the city report a significant challenge to their operations, including funding shortfalls and insecurity along key access routes. Our humanitarian colleagues say the health facilities are overstretched and mobile clinics are struggling to manage growing caseloads of injuries, acute malnutrition, and respiratory infections. Our partners also warn that without urgent reinforcement of basic services and increased funding, the already dire conditions in Tawila could worsen even further. Despite these challenges, aid organizations continue to do whatever they can to deliver aid. We are also deeply concerned by the ongoing violence in other parts of Darfur. In central Darfur State, our colleagues from Médecins Sans Frontières said today that for the second time this year, the organization has been forced to reduce support to Zelengi Hospital to keep its own teams safe. This comes after a Ministry of Health worker was fatally shot outside the facility a week ago, with 4 others injured. Hostilities are continuing to imperil civilians in Kordofan and forcing families from their homes. IOM reports that more than 600 people were displaced from 2 villages in South Kordofan State on Saturday. We call again for protection of civilians across Sudan, as well as safe and unimpeded access to deliver life-saving assistance, also urging owners to scale up funding to meet the growing needs across Darfur, Kordofan, and other parts of Sudan that need help. Just south of Sudan in Abyei, our peacekeeping mission there reports that the Ngok Dinka and Miseria communities signed an agreement this week renewing their pledge to prevent conflict, safeguard livelihoods, and ensure the protection of civilians along migration corridors. The leaders of both communities called on peacekeeping mission to strengthen the protection of civilian mandate and enhance security measures in the Amiet common market. Abyei also faces heightened security risks and resources pressure due to an influx of displaced people during the migration seasons, both during the southward migration movement at the start of the dry season and the reverse migration when cattle herders move northwards as the rainy season gets underway. And across the continent in Nigeria, the World Food Programme today warned that the growing instability across northern Nigeria, including a surge in attacks, is driving hunger levels to never been seen before levels. Nearly 35 million human beings are projected to face severe food insecurity during the 2026 lean season. That's the highest number ever recorded in Nigeria. Children are, of course, at greater risks, as one can imagine. Funding shortfalls have compounded the crisis, limiting WFP's ability to provide the assistance people need. If you recall, in July, WFP was forced to scale down nutrition programs. That impacted 300,000 children. Without urgent funding, WFP will exhaust resources for emergency food and nutrition support in December, leaving millions vulnerable in 2026 and risking further instability in a crisis the world cannot afford to ignore. And moving to Ukraine, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that large-scale attacks continue in the capital across multiple regions, killing and injuring dozens of civilians. Between yesterday and this morning in Kyiv, a large-scale attack killed at least 7 civilians and injured 20 others. Residential buildings, a preschool, and a playground were also damaged. The attack further disrupted electricity, heating, and water supplies, which, as you know, has been a challenge throughout Ukraine. Strikes also impacted the regions of Chernihiv, Dnipro, Donetsk, Kherson, Odessa, and Zaporizhzhia. Critical infrastructure sustained extensive damage. Authorities reported that parts of Kharkiv were left without electricity and water. More than 50,000 people in Kyiv and Chernihiv region faced emergency outages. Nationwide, more than 100,000 consumers remain without electricity following the latest wave of strikes. Rolling outages continue, further complicating preparations for the onset of winter. Humanitarian organizations provide emergency assistance in Kyiv and the surrounded areas, and that included hot meals and warm clothing. Meanwhile, our humanitarian partners continue to scale up services to address gender-based violence nationwide. By the end of October, nearly 360,000 women and girls had received support from 100 organizations, with the highest in Kherson, Kharkiv, and Dnipro regions. Nearly 160,000 women and girls took part in awareness-raising activities. 85,000 received psychological support, and around 80,000 were provided with dignity kits. You will have seen that yesterday evening we issued a statement from the Secretary General on the conclusion of the 6th session of the Conference of the Establishment of a Middle East Zone Free of Nuclear Weapons and Other Weapons of Mass Destruction. The Secretary General said he's encouraged by the tangible and steady progress the conference has made over its successive sessions and assured our continued support for this critical endeavor to rid the Middle East and, of course, the entire world of nuclear weapons and all other weapons of mass destruction. The work of this conference, he said, is a key compound in building a Middle East that is safer and more prosperous for all. The Secretary General commended the president of the conference, Mr. Omar Hilal, who, as you know, is the permanent representative of the Kingdom of Morocco, and participating states in the conference for their open, inclusive, and consensus-based approach to advancing negotiations towards a future treaty. He also congratulated Omar Al-Khatiri, the permanent representative of Oman to the UN, on his endorsement as the president of the 7th session, and we wish him every success. Awkward silence. Questions? Deji.
Hi, Steph. I believe recently, except for me, not that many people ask you about Venezuela situation. This week, we noticed that the U.S. government labeled a Cutter of the Sun, the organization, as the terrorist group, and the U.S. government also suggests that the President Maduro of Venezuela is leading that organization. What is the position of the UN on that labeling?
Listen, we don't have a particular position on...
Is that even exist, that group?
Let me just... Okay. We don't have a particular position on that labeling and that decision, which was made unilateral decision by the United States. I can tell you, though, that we've been following the general situation with grave concern, especially between the U.S. and Venezuela and the Southern Caribbean, and the increasingly confrontational rhetoric which risks heightening regional unease. It's imperative that all member states and all actions by member states fully comply in their obligations under international law, including the Charter. And the Secretary General calls on member states to create opportunities for dialogue and to continue to engage in efforts to find a peaceful way forward.
Has the Secretary General ever reached out to Venezuela representative or U.S. ones or maybe regional groups?
Venezuelan representatives have been in touch with us on this issue on a regular basis. Pam.
Yesterday you said there was no U.S., UN or Ukraine UN conversations to speak of. Is there any checking in with UN representatives about the revisions to the Ukraine?
No, I mean,
peace
listen,
plan?
we've all seen the press reports relating to new versions of the discussions. We're obviously following all of this very closely, but we are not party to these discussions.
And no weighing in by anyone on the elements of it, right?
No, I mean, listen, as I said, we're not a party to it. I think you know the Secretary General's principled and consistent position on how he would like to see an end to this conflict, and we continue to hold to that position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions on? Yes.
Thank you, Steve. So my question is about Japan and China. As I know, yesterday you have already answered it from our colleague this question, but after your answer, so Japanese ambassador submit a letter to the Secretary General. So I can say the situation is not getting better. So could you give me a comment?
I mean, no other comment except to say that obviously we're following the situation very closely, and would encourage dialogue between the two to appease the situation. I know a number of you had asked me yesterday about Sudan and the announcement from the RSF about a possible humanitarian ceasefire, and I just want to let you know that the announcement of a 3 months humanitarian ceasefire from the RSF is a step in the right direction. But importantly, the proof of sincerity will be that it must protect civilians, it must let aid at scale, and allow us to work independently. We will, of course, test that as we seek to reach as many people, as many Sudanese civilians as we can. Okay, thank you. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned in the introduction that the Secretary General believes that technology has amplified the threats against women. Can you elaborate more on that, please?
I mean, you know, all you need to do is to log on to social media accounts and see the vitriolic hate that is aimed at women. You look at the hate that is thrown at women journalists, at women politicians. I mean, I think it's an example that is clear, and it's also one of the reasons Secretary General calls on technology companies to do their part. Okay, thank you. I will get our guests, and we will be